Hello, I'm Joe Walensky, and I'm the program manager for the ConveyUX conference. And I'm interviewing some of the many personalities who will be bringing interesting topics and presentations to our conference, which takes place in January in Seattle. And I have a very interesting person with me that we'll get to know today, who's going to be one of our featured speakers, and that is Eric Reiss, or sometimes Rice. He can explain the difference there of fat ducks. And I'll just say hello. How you doing, Eric?
Well, hello, Joe, and hello, Seattle, and hello, ConveyUX. Thanks for having me.
So, which way do you like to do it, Reese or Rice? I think it's gone both ways.
My father was born in Austria, and he was Reiss throughout his youth, and then when the Nazis threw him out in '38 and came to the United States, the United States couldn't figure out how to pronounce the I before E except after C, so he was called Reese. And this was not much of a problem until I went to university with a girl from Louisville, Kentucky, whose name was Claire Rice. Our English lit professor never figured this out. And then a couple of years later, I moved to Copenhagen, Denmark, where I've lived for pretty much 40 years now, where they do pronounce it Reiss. So I have a tendency when I speak German and Danish to say it Rice, and when I'm speaking English, I have a tendency to say Reese. Now, the problem is that there is, in fact, another author, Eric Rees, actually pronounced that way, who wrote The Lean Startup. And so suddenly it's become very confusing that there are people, two people with very similar names in our arena who yeah, I mean,
Okay.
how many Eric Reeses can there be, for Christ's sake?
And your company, Fat Ducks. So that's Fat Ducks. But where'd that name come about? And tell us a little bit about your regular work that you're involved in.
Right, well, Fat Ducks, I think it was my former partner, Søren Moose, who came up with that name. Ducks used to be a conference in San Francisco, Design of User Experience, and uh, both Søren and I liked duck, the food, and fat ducks are juicy and they taste wonderful, uh, and we thought, well, Fat Ducks was kind of a cool name for a company. It also gives us an opportunity to tell a story because invariably everyone asks us, why are you called Fat Ducks? Now, the funny thing is that I get mail for the Eric Rees who wrote the Lean Startup, and I also get mail for a three-star Michelin chef by the name of Heston Blumenthal, who has a restaurant south of London, I think it's in Windsor, which is called the Fat Duck. And so, a good choice of name. I'm very happy. So I get to exchange emails with Heston Blumenthal every once in a while.
Well, you're going to be giving a featured talk at the conference, and you're also going to be doing one of our Saturday workshops. But let me just talk to you about a couple of those topics. One of those you title innovation versus best practice conflict or opportunity. So, what's going on there? What uh, issues or challenges did you identify, and what kinds of things are you going to talk about?
Innovation is an interesting subject. I don't know of any companies in Europe, and I don't know a lot in the United States that don't have innovation as one of their value words. The problem is, if you look this up in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, innovation and invention are basically considered the same thing. And the truth is, invention can happen by accident. It's one of those eureka moments where something happens and somebody says, wow, this is cool, this is a way to do things. Whereas innovation is very much a planned process. And companies that just lock a bunch of creative people in a room and say, okay, be innovative and come back in 4 hours with really cool new ideas, these exercises generally don't work very well. So the theme of my talk is to differentiate between innovation and invention, because I see these as two very distinct activities, but also to bring in best practice. We have design patterns if we're working online. We have a lot of best practices was coined by Tom Peters back in the 80s when he wrote his book In Search of Excellence. Uh, it's a great term. Basically what Mr. Peters did was go out and interview people at Xerox and Kodak and other companies that uh, were were doing things well back in the 1980s and say, well, are there commonalities that we can look at? Is there some way that we can discern some methodology that can be applied to other industries, so-called best practices? And the best practices in our industry have a tendency to be considered sort of the oil and water of what's going, or innovation and best practice are sort of oil and water, and I don't see them that way at all. I think that best practice is something that grows out of innovation, and the next cycle of innovation builds on whatever best practices have been established. So that's it in a nutshell.
All right. Well, the other topic that you're going to be talking about is the elements of service design, and you're going to be doing that in a workshop format, and that had a lot of different components to that. But maybe some people that aren't familiar with that term, kind of what's the domain that you'll be playing in, and what's sort of the scope of what you'll be having in that discussion.
Sure, Joe. I think we need to take a step backward, and perhaps spend a little time discussing what is user experience. I take a very broad view. If you go on the Wikipedia,
You're gonna have you're gonna answer that question for several thousand people, because I hear that come up all the time with all the different sub-disciplines that everyone's involved with today.
well, but sub-disciplines is the key word, Joe. I mean, you hit it right on the nail. User experience has been around forever. Uh, and the fact that in more recent years, I'm thinking the last 20 years, user experience has been something that has been confined to a screen, I think is wrong, because experience design has been around for a long time, and the truth is the discipline has been around for millennia, under different names. And I think heaven forbid anyone who comes from the so-called user experience community should dare edit the Wikipedia page on experience design, and vice versa. This is crazy, though. I see them as exactly the same thing. If we believe the Bible, if Jesus turned water into wine, I mean, if that isn't a user experience, I don't know what is. And yes, I have read John, and yes, I know it wasn't for the guests at the wedding. Major mistake, Jesus. It was, though, to convince the disciples that he was the true Messiah. But the point is that this is user experience, and I think that user experience is basically sort of the summa summarum of a series of interactions, and these interactions can be between people, events, or machines, and any combination of these. And if we interpret this very broadly, certainly service design becomes part of that. What is good service at a restaurant? What is good service on an airline? What is good service when we go to a website? Whatever. If we start to chart out these particular touch points, which 30 years ago we called moments of truth, as I say, the names change, but the discipline hasn't, not at all. And so the purpose of my workshop is, through a lightning 3 hours, including the break. I really need to talk to you about giving me an extra hour somehow. I'd like to share some techniques that have been successful for me. Some of them were pioneered by myself. Some of them have been pioneered by others. the point though is to help people who feel in some way locked into, oh, everything we do happens on screen, to show them how they can use their knowledge, how they can use their tools, how they can use their talents to get into other areas of user experience that are sometimes very profitable.
Well, certainly as user experience professionals, we're all able to identify new areas that we want to expand into, that we want to gather our own knowledge for, where we want to hone our skills, maybe try some new things out, explore different areas. But most of us also work in organizations where either we're working for client projects, or we're in an organization where we're one department within the organization. Yet the types of things you were talking about for experience, affect everything about what everybody's doing in terms of getting out a product or service. And so, how is it practical to, just within organizational structures, for us to be able to break out of this is the UX department and affect other parts of the organization, which also in their own ways are affecting the overall experience of whatever that product or service might be?
Okay, there's a two-stage process here, Joe. First, you talked about the UX department. This is a term that I object to, but we'll get back to that in a moment. The UX department needs to prove the worth of the value of their work, and I'm not sure that that happens in so many companies. The C-levels say, no, 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 we have people working on UX. We don't have to think about that anymore. So it is a question of showing people some quick wins. If you can show the C-levels that there is money into providing a better experience, and that experience is often the only differentiator in a very crowded market with a lot of Me Too products, then the people who are working within this UX department will get bigger budgets and a greater mandate, and also start to have the ear of the people who are making decisions very high up in the organization. The second part, though, is most critical, and that is there is no such thing as a UX department. The whole idea of a UX team of one I find absolutely abhorrent. I think that every company, every person who works in that company needs to be part of the UX team, and they need to understand that they're contributing to the ultimate good of the product, the service, the company, and so on. Everyone needs to be involved, and everyone needs to understand it. And so these silos that I see being built up within our industry right now can be very dangerous, and ultimately may very well kill our industry if we don't get our acts together, because everybody needs to be part of the UX team, and everyone is part of the UX team whether they know it or not. Our job is to help communicate that they do contribute, from the guy on the motorcycle who delivers the pizza, to the person who bakes it, to the person who decides what flour should be purchased, to the one who decides the quality of the pepperoni. That's just a pizza, for goodness sakes. But there are a lot of people involved in that process, and they all contribute to the ultimate user experience.
Well, on the Saturday workshop, when you're talking about service design, there are a lot of different aspects that you list for that workshop that you're planning to talk about. What do you think are some of the key pillars of that, the areas that you're particularly going to dig into?
Good question. A lot is going to depend on who comes to the workshop. My workshops are both interactive, but I have a tendency to deviate from the plan. I mean, I know the material that I want to cover. I know the ideas that I'd like to share. How much time is spent on specific tools, that depends on what people know. One of the things that I've learned recently, most recently at UX Australia, was that in a room with 60 people where everybody said, yes, we've done personas, uh, I think at the end of a 10-minute exercise, everyone came away with a much more valuable view of how they can use personas within their own work. So again, it's all there in the syllabus, in the description of the workshop. How much time we spend on all of this, that will depend on the individual participants. That said, I am certainly hoping that the people who attend are at least aware of problems when they go through airport security, that they at least think about bad service when they go to a restaurant, and other things of a similar kind. These are all things that can be choreographed, and we've developed some tools at FatDucks that haven't been published in the books, that are pretty easy to implement and help people prioritize, well, what do we do so that we can actually make a change when we don't have a lot of money and we don't have a lot of support from the higher ups. And again, this goes to point one, that what are the quick wins? What can we do to show people that there is money in user experience, or service design for that matter? Service design as being a very important part these days of the ultimate user experience.
Well, just in finishing things up, are there any particular issues broadly for us as professionals that you see as touch points that we should really be paying attention to going into the next several years? Or do you have any concerns, or do you see any particular opportunities that you talk to your colleagues about?
Uh, Good question, Joe. Sorry, I've got a terrible cold. I have to mute every once in a while so that I don't cough in your face. Um, I think I see lots of opportunities because I think that user experience really is the mother lode, and when applied correctly, when understood, and when used within organizations, it really provides a key uh, uh, business advantage to our clients, to the companies we work for, and so on. I think that one of the problems right now is that we have a community that is in many ways siloed. We have a lot of different people who are already contributing in their own way to the ultimate user experience, but it's, if you were going to build a house and you had a hammer and a screwdriver and a ruler and a wrench, like, which tool would you want if you were going to build a house, Joe?
Uh, Geez, you're talking to the wrong guy. I'll take a hammer.
You take a hammer?
Saw,
Yeah.
screwdriver.
Oh, saw. Yeah, saw,
Uh,
screwdriver. The point is, they're all important, and so we've got a whole bunch of tools in our toolkit, and we have people from one camp saying, "Ooh, pick me, pick me, pick me," and others saying, "Pick me, pick me, pick me." It's like the old Arab proverb of the blind men describing the elephant. One gets hold of an ear and says, "Ooh, the elephant is like a fan," and the other gets hold of a leg and says, "No, no, no, it's like a tree." The other gets a trunk and says, "It's like a serpent." The truth is that all of these things describe the elephant, and yet none of them describe the elephant. And I think that this is something that we need to be aware of in our community, because if we don't start recognizing the value of all the disciplines that are involved, and perhaps stop trying to take ownership of this community. I'm not sure that anyone can own the user experience community. Somebody else is going to come along with a fancy buzzword, and we're all going to be relegated to subcontractors, to somebody else, some smart consultant who has invented a term. And this is the one that all the C-levels are going to fall in love with. And that is going to be the death knell for a lot of UX companies. I think that we have something extremely valuable, but we also need to learn to play nice in the sandbox.
All right, well, great. Well, thanks for spending this time to share your thoughts with me and the others that might be viewing this. And again, we'll get a chance to talk to you in person when you visit Seattle in late January. So we'll have the information out about your sessions pretty soon. So other than that, thank you very much, and I'll see you soon.
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you to everyone at ConveyUX for uh, giving me this opportunity. I'm looking forward to getting back to Washington to see Seattle again. Lovely, lovely city. A lot of things that I need to do. I've never been to your art museum, so that's on my agenda. So thanks again, Joe.
All right,
I'm looking forward to it.
thank you.